This video is going to cover Agility Label Designer and Agility Document Management, which is included within our Agility Essentials. We also show how you can create your own functions using Agility design tools and attach labels and crystal reports as well.
So this session, we're going to really cover some of the advanced capabilities that are already included in Agility Essentials, which is our introductory level or our base level software product. We're going to talk about document management, our label designer, which is included with Essentials, and then taking a crystal report and attaching it to, in this case, maybe a mobile function. So with this, I'm going to transfer over to Jim.
So as Scott mentioned, we wanted to kind of go over some of the functionality that comes with the product, and specifically documents and attaching them in document management, and using our label maker and attaching a crystal report. So I'll start by showing you where you manage documents, and that's once the WiSys add-on is started in SAP Business One, under Options, Documents, and then Document Management. Now we give you several out-of-the-box labels and documents standard with the product. That includes some item labels, some purchase order receiving labels. You can see that I've already got these loaded here. But these are categories where you can load labels. Today I'll focus on inventory. The demo I've put together is for an inventory label. And right now I don't have anything loaded in the standard item label document type. So we're going to create a couple of labels quick, load them into the standard item label section document type, and attach this document type to a handheld application or handheld form. So we'll be back in document management here in a few minutes once we have some documents. So as Scott mentioned, the Agility Label Designer is included with the product, and I've gone ahead and started the setup of this already just to kind of make it go a little quicker. But I just clicked on setup. I can see that I've got a 4x3 label. You have the ability to do like a 2-up, 3-up, 4-up label depending on the label stock being used, and then different printer settings. If it's gap labels or mark sensing labels, you can change those settings here. But I'm just going to leave it standard 4x3 for right now. And everything that you put on a label is driven, I should say, all of the non-static fields, the dynamic fields, are driven from a SQL query. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my SQL query on this label. So I'm going to click on my data tab here and SQL query. Now I've kind of cheated a little bit and I've copied it, so I don't have to type it. So in this case, I'm just going to query the item or the item master table, just to get a couple of pieces of information. And then I'm going to pass some parameters to it that are going to conditionally format a field and populate some data in some other fields, as well as a barcode. So any field that you have returned in your query can be used in the label. And obviously you can do joins or use views or whatever you need to in your SQL query to build your label. So I'm going to format the SQL just to make sure that I don't have any SQL errors. And you can see that it formats, and you can also use the query editor or the builder down here if you wanted to select some other columns that you wanted into your query. And if you do joins, obviously all of the tables you join will show here. And then next, I'm going to add some parameters to the report. So I'm going to click on my parameter list here, and I'm going to set a new parameter that's a string, and that's my item code. And I'm going to add another one that is my warehouse. And my serial number. And my batch number. I'm going to save those. So you can see that I have some case statements using using the batch and serial parameters in the report to drive some certain conditional formatting on some of the fields within the label. The same thing with this. I'm reading the manage batch number column table for the item, and if it's a yes, I'm going to change some column text to batch or serial, depending on what is in the database for that particular item. So I'm done with my query for right now. I'm going to save and close my query, and we'll start adding some fields to the label here. So I'll box here, and at the top here, I'm going to make this my item. So you see when I added a text box, all of the properties for the text box showed on the side. I'm specifically going to look for data field, and this is where it's coming from the database. So I want this to be the item code. In this case, I'm passing it as a parameter, so I could use it from the parameter as well. Either one would be acceptable. And I'm going to center this. And I'm going to make the font a little larger. And we'll go a little bit bigger than that too. And under the human readable of the item code, I also want to do a barcode for the same thing. So I've added a barcode from the top. And again, you can see all the properties for a barcode. We have documentation on the different symbology types that we support in our label designer on our website. And we can provide you with all of that information. But we support a number of different symbologies. This is a standard code 128, but you can also do 2D barcodes. I mean, like I said, there's a bunch of different supported symbologies that you can see here. So I don't need to dive too far into that, but we're going to use a standard code 128. And then I'm going to look for the data field again. And I'm going to select item code. And in this case, I've added a human readable above it, and I don't really want to label it. So I'm going to get rid of this text that says item code, because I know that that's the item code. Now you can do human readable. You can display it if you want to display it, but I like to do them in separate fields, at least for a label like this, just so you can control the font size a little bit better. I'm going to add another text box here that it's going to be the item name. And again, I'm going to make this a little larger in the font and center it. And a couple more fields I'm going to put on here. I'm going to make this where I conditionally just decided if this was a serialized or lotted item or batched item. And so for this data field, it is to center that as well. And I'm going to add another text box. That is the actual batch or serial number coming through. Center that as well. A couple more fields and we'll be done here. I'm just going to put the warehouse here. And this is going to be a static field, so I'm just going to type it. And center. And the last field I'm going to add is going to be the warehouse coming from the application. Data field warehouse, and again, I'll center it. Okay, so I basically just, this is very close to a standard label that I designer to design labels. I've got this saved as WS standard item label, and then the WLB for WiSys label. I'm going to save it. You could also preview it. If I wanted my item code to be S1000 warehouse 05, this is a serialized item number. So it's not a batched. You know, you can pop up the data. You can preview what the data would look like on your label. So I've saved that. I'm going to close it so I can load it into Document Manager. I'll show you that I've also basically created the same label in Crystal reports, and I put a little static CR at the top. So when we demo printing this, you can see where it comes from Crystal versus from our label designer. But again, this is very much the same layout of the same label. So you do have the option of attaching Crystal reports as well. We do have some documentation on our website about the appropriate data source connection to use, as well as the barcodes that we support, the barcode format that we support in Crystal. And that's a basic syntax ID automation barcode formula. And again, that formula is on our website, and then you just enter the data that you want to decode into that. So again, I've saved this one in the same place as a Crystal report with a similar name, just to keep it simple. Oops. So I need to close it in order to add it to the label designer, or in order to add it to the document manager, I'm sorry. So I'll open Document Manager again. And what this is doing is taking the label and loading it into the database. And when it's called from the mobile applications, it's called from the database directly, not the file path that you pull the label from. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my standard item label and do new. So I've got my Crystal report. I'll add my WiSys label. Okay, so now I have two labels here, and some of the good functionality and nice functionality of the Document Manager is you can see both of these right now are set to public, so which means anytime that I call this standard doc type from any of the mobile applications or desktop applications for that matter, it would print both of these labels. But in this case, I want to set one of these to only print under certain criteria. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the Crystal report only to one item. I mean, you could assign it by items or item groups. So if you had different label requirements for different item groups, you could assign different item groups their own label without having to create another doc type and put all of that logic into your mobile application. So I'm going to add a specific item to this particular document. And at the same time, since I have this S1000 item printing the standard item Crystal report, I don't want it to print when I'm printing this label. So it's set to public, but now I'm going to exclude that same item from the WiSys label. And again, you can have as many labels as you want. You can have as many items or item groups as you want in here to include and exclude. Now, let's say I went in here and I made an adjustment to the Crystal report. So I wanted to let's just say, just to make it easy, I didn't like how that font size, so I just changed the font size and saved my report. In order for that change to be picked up in the data, you'll open the document to your report. standard item label, right click on it and refresh. And that brings all of your changes into the database. So now that we've got our documents loaded, it's time to set them up on a handheld application. So I'm going to open our design tool for our handheld applications, which is Form Studio. And I've made a copy of our standard item labels form just for the sake of this demo. So we've got some fields on here. And on this print button, I want to attach what I just created in Crystal Reports and in the WiSys label designer. So I'm going to click on my actions for the print button. And I'm going to select print document, and you can see all of those document types that were in Document Manager show up there. And this is the standard inventory label. And it reads the parameters from the reports. One thing to make note of is if you have multiple documents, reports, Crystal Reports, what have you, in the same doc type, they all have to have the exact same parameters, otherwise they will not print. So in this case, I'm going to send the item code from the form, the warehouse from the form, the serial number from the form, and the batch number from the form. And click next, and I know some custom item logic from where I dictated what I wanted specific labels to print out for specific items. So I want to make sure that I call that out, and that was the second page here. I'm going to use items to determine which label is going to be printed. So I'm going to save my form, and you could preview it in the design tool, or I could open Agility Mobile. But here I've got my form, and at the bottom, anytime there's a document attached to a handheld application or a function, you can hit the printer, and you can see that I have both of these. This is my Crystal report. I can tell it, I can default the printer. So anytime that the particular user that's using the handheld would print that specific document, it would go to the printer they predefine, or you can define it each to it ahead of time. And I want to print it to screen, but that's the Crystal report. So the WiSys label, I'm going to print to screen. That's our own image rendering piece of software for let's see, where do I want to send I'll send this to Snagit. I'll send the Crystal report to Snagit. So if I start with I'm going to print the label for just a non-batched, non-serialized item. I type in my item number, and it automatically generated my label. So you can see this is the label from the Agility label designer. I don't have the static CR that I put up here to indicate that it was a Crystal report. And since it was not a batched or serialized item, the batch or serial number didn't show up. If I wanted to do a batched item, I can enter the batched item, do a lookup to find the batch that I want to print. And again, here's the label we just made. It says batch here because it's batched. And there's the batch number in the warehouse from the label. Now, if I do S1000, which is the item that I made specific to the Crystal report, again, I can choose the serial number that I want to print. This should open up my Snagit, which it does. So you can see here is the Crystal report for that item and the serial number. So there's lots of control that you have over documents as far as public and private. You know, you might have items that have different size labels, lots of different things you can do just by attaching different documents to one document type and loading them to a mobile function, or loading them in Document Manager and loading into a mobile function. Scott, anything else that you want me to cover on that?
Could you just go back to SAP Document Management? So,
oh yes.
Yep. Yeah. So A lot of the out-of-the-box functions within Agility Essentials are, like if you go up to sales, but even if you didn't have our design tools and you wanted to stick to, whoops, I got to show my screen. Sorry about that. We can see my screen now?
Yes.
Good, okay. So, so a lot of our standard mobile functions that come in Essentials already have the ability, are already tying into the document management. What Jim created was a new mobile function, brand new from scratch, that requires our design tools. But I just wanted to let you know, even if you're doing like creating delivery orders, all that's built into here, and it's already preset, where you don't have to go into Forms Studio to set up the printing, unless you're doing something different. So we have a lot of these functions already set, and we have a lot of crystal reports. I already have a lot of crystal reports set up, for delivery orders or packing slips, PO receivers, all kinds of other things. And then Jim probably has, I don't know, a dozen or more labels already set up. So we give you a lot of crystal reports and labels for starting points. And then if you are using our design tools, you actually have the ability. So if you're creating a function and it doesn't fit into one of these that we already have, you can create we have user-defined functions. So like I have one I created a crystal report route sheet for sales order route sheets for multiple orders going on the same shipping type. So then what I did is using design tools, I just said, hey, user-defined number 2, call that, which happens to be a crystal report. So again, we have a lot of out-of-the-box functionality, but then we also have the ability for user-defined to adding user-defined functionality. I think the only other thing I can show from here, Jim, is a more complex label, a UCC 128 label that we include as a starting point. So, this is a little bit more extreme. It's a different size. There's a lot more to this label. So again, a box label or a container label, and just looking at the number, there's a dozen or so labels here.
And the UCC will be helpful for any EDI customers. It's a good starting point. A lot of EDI trading partners have different label requirements. This is you could use this as a template to get you started. And then again, using the public and private, documents for something like this, or a shipping label, you can set it to a specific customer or a customer group. So some more of the power of private and public documents and Document Manager.
Yeah, so Jim showed you on the item side, it was really item and item types. On the sales order side, obviously it's customer groups. The purchasing side, it's purchasing items, purchasing groups. We have the labels for production and so forth. So there's a lot of labeling functionality built within standard Agility Essentials, and then if you want to take it up a notch and make it a little bit more complicated, you can.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions or would like to get more information, please contact WiSys.